today I have a great honor of having
Paul Scott.
the
Paul Scott
okay.
Jr.
Yeah, we excited, man, tonight. This is our very first episode. And no, I feel so honored with who we were allowed to pick to be the first guest. Amazing story with Paul Scott Sr. and his son, Paul Scott Jr. So I'm excited, and I hope our listeners tonight would understand that, we're excited about bringing real life testimonies. And Paul, it's great having you on. You're doing great things. And just tell me a little bit about a few things you got going on.
Well, I'm doing involved with doing a correctional ministry with doing a Tyro Dad program at Metro Reentry.
Mm-hmm.
I do a program at Georgia Diagnostic Classification under Chaplain Bernard Miller. I also do Offenders Alumni Association at the City of Refuge, and this been going on under reentry, and reentry is real big in my life.
Okay.
And I have numerous inmates that's gotten released that I've assisted with getting established in the community back properly.
That's good. What about you, Paul Scott Jr.? What you up to these days, man?
I'm an electrician
Mm-hmm.
right now, and I'm just doing outreach with a buddy of mine, just young brothers that's looking for jobs, just helping them get jobs in Pasadena, where I'm
Okay.
from. Um, and that's it. Being a
Yeah,
dad.
that's one of the greatest jobs, man, being a dad, man. You're doing a great job from what your pop been sharing with me. So I'm excited to have y'all on the show. I'm excited to be able to create this platform for men and women to tell their testimony, talk about times where, they had to overcome things. So it's gonna be a great show tonight, and we are excited. I am Greg Washington. I'm your host from the Inside Out podcast, and tonight I have Paul Scott and Paul Scott Jr. This is going to be a great night. All right, so let's get started. So, Paul, I want to ask you a few questions,
Sure.
and I just want you to just, feel good, man, with sharing with the audience kind of some of the things that you've been through. So, during your early part of your incarceration, when was that moment that you feel like you was the victim in that situation?
While I was in the county jail, really, because so much was going on, I felt like I was a victim. Uh, but after I got tried, convicted, and sentenced, I accepted what had happened. Shortly after I had gotten convicted, my son was born.
Mm.
Uh, and that reality hit me that, I'm responsible for a life being brought into the world. But here I am, I'm going into the prison system with a life sentence.
Mm.
So just processing that and having to put to the side playing the blame game, although I still played it for the first 2, 3, 4 years. And for the first 5 years of my incarceration, I was basically still living the same life and caught up in the madness that I was, before I even entered into the prison system.
Mm.
But my father, he was on his dying bed, and his last request was to see his baby boy before he passed away. And I went before 3 associate wardens, and I was denied that opportunity to go see my father, the man that brought me in this world. I
Mm.
was 24 and a half years old.
Mm.
And so me going back to a prison cell and processing that, I'd never be able to see him alive again. That's whenever my life began to change, and I didn't play the victim role at all anymore. I began to take complete responsibility for me, educational wise, therapy wise, self help, and trying to fulfill the relationship even more so with my son at the time. And he was 4 years old
Mm.
at that time.
Mm. That's great, man. I appreciate you sharing that because I know that had to be a pretty tough situation. But I want to ask you, Paul, anger, denial, grief. Talk a little bit more about that, man, because I know. When did you get that sentence? How old were you?
I was 19 years old.
You was
I got
19 years
I was
old.
19 years old when I was sentenced, to basically 15 years of life plus 3 years running consecutively. So I had to do the three before I started the 15. So basically, it was an 18 to life sentence.
Mm,
Uh, I turned 20 years old on June the 21st, 1981.
mm,
4 days later is when my son was born, June the 25th.
mm,
So I'm basically 20 years and 4 days older than him.
mm,
Uh, so we almost more closer like brothers than we are father and son. And I had to become a friend to him before I was able to become play the father because I wasn't in society with him to establish the father bond on the
mm,
father foundation. And then I never had an opportunity to fully affirm, consolidate the father son relationship because I didn't have the resources
mm,
made available for me. I mean, I'm provided 4 5 hour visits every 2 3 months, and then a family visit 2 3 times a year where we spending 48, 46, 47 hours in a trailer visiting.
mm,
And when we first would start the visit, it's great, but when the visit's over with, it's like being arrested all over again. They going home, and I'm
mm,
going back into the prison, and
mm,
it was like torture. But that's the only avenues I had to have a relationship.
mm,
So it was the best I had to work with, and that caused a lot of anger to come. But I had to suppress it because I couldn't show it, I couldn't display it because I would have been looked at as a management problem, a prisoner out of control.
mm,
And so I'm trying to show that I'm a cooperative and that I don't pose no threat to the population, so that I wouldn't be put into any type of category that would prevent me from having the privileges that were made available. I wanted to have as many privileges made available as possible, such as making phone calls, going on visits, able to go to the canteen, having access at the recreational equipment, making purchases, things
mm,
along that line, because that was the only source of freedom that an inmate really had available.
mm, mm.
So, my emotion was constantly vasculating, in various degrees because of uh, not being able to express real emotions that a human being should be able to express at the age of 21, 22, 23, 24,
Mm,
being deprived of resources that should be made available to
mm,
be able to grow and be nurtured
mm,
properly in those areas. I didn't have that.
mm,
So for what I did have, and then, not really going too fast forward, but for my son and I to have became united in the manner that we did and be able to work that out,
mm.
it was like a miracle because the resources it wasn't meant to happen. It
All
wasn't
right.
meant for me
So
to
I'm
be
gonna
able to do
stop
that.
right
There you
there
go.
because
All
I want to fuse because
right.
I need Paul Scott Jr. So I want everybody to know we have father and son. We got Paul Scott Sr. and Paul Scott Jr. So Paul Scott Jr., this question is to you. How was it being a son of an incarcerated father? And how were you the victim in this situation?
Um, I didn't really look at myself as a victim until I got older because it was normal to me. It became normal to see my dad go on visits and see him. It was normal, and how it negatively impacted me. I think it was more of his reputation and just trying to keep up with his legacy that he left on the street. That which is all I knew was was blue. Like blue. Oh, you blue son. So I had to live up to that. So I think that that and just my environment and not just having uh, a father figure in my life at those early
Hmm.
stages.
All right. So I want you to dig a little deeper, Paul, because we're talking about breaking cycles of self destruction and broken families. So you
Right.
just let me know that
Right.
divorce with you and your father early on shaped the way that you was trying to live up to what he had left you as an inheritance, as being the person that he is. So tell me, how did that make you angry? Talk about that.
Um, as I started getting older, it made me angry because I I feel like I didn't know him. Like he left me out here to keep up with his name, and it was no help from
Mm,
him. Like I was there by
mm,
myself, and I had to live for him and for me, but at the same time, because I always respected my dad. I've always had the respect there, but I still had that anger too because it was like I'm out here fending for myself, for you and for me. Like even my relationship with my grandma. That's why I like let me go to my granny house. Mama, let me go to my granny house. And I had a little more freedom at my granny house too. So I went over there for that. But I felt like because my dad wasn't there, that I had to be there for my grandmother too.
right.
So it was like I was kind of angry at him for leaving my grandma too because I was the one going up there with her, getting up in the morning at 4 and 5 in the morning to go see him. So anger came, and I think I took it out on towards a lot of people. Like I said, who asked me? Nobody never asked me was I cool. They just, I guess everybody just figured I was all
Mm.
right.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that,
But
Paul Jr., because I see that as real, raw emotions, man. So, Paul, I want to go back to you, man. When you first received this sentence, I know anger, denial, shock, all these things was going into play. So, my question to you is, did you just accept it?
Yes, I did. I accepted it. And at the time, it was easy for me because I was young and I
Mm,
had family support
okay.
and I had something to look forward to.
Mm,
I had something to prepare for. I entered the system illiterate. I never benefited from the educational system in society. So, one of the things in the back of my mind is that I was aware of uh, individuals who had went to prison and became smart or intelligent while they were there and they came out and made a life for themselves.
mm,
So I began to think that that's something I could possibly do. So getting an education was something that did become big for me. So
okay.
it gave me a little hope to, because I was illiterate when I went in. I just know how to count because I sold dope and I gambled. But as far as reading and writing, I couldn't read or write my way out of a wet paper bag.
Mm, mm. That's good. That's good. Please explain the time when you recognized that breaking the cycle was important for you and Paul Jr.
I realized that breaking the cycle was important. It's funny you say that, which was the very last time his mother brought him to see me. His mother brought him to see me 3 times. When he was 18 months old, 2 years old, and when he was 7 years old. When he was 7 years old, he was bigger
Mm,
that time. And so me seeing him grow up and him being more physical now and stuff, and I'm seeing features that he was possessing that I had. I'm
mm,
seeing my features in him now. And so I'm realizing, man, that's a part of me.
mm.
And I don't want him to have to go through this. And so I got to do what's necessary that to prevent that from happening. And so I got to break this cycle of incarceration or this cycle of crime, this cycle of corruption, this cycle of just being caught up in illegal activities.
All right. So that's a good segue. So what did you start doing, Paul, to do that?
I got involved in some self help programs. For me, initially, I started doing it for the system because it was something that was recommended by the Board of Prison Terms. But then I realized I need to do this for myself.
Mm,
I need to do this for my family. I
mm,
want to have something to offer them when I
mm.
return home. I want to be able to have a new life. I want to be able to provide for them a safe environment to live in. I want to be able to help them make healthy choices and healthy decisions
Mm.
that will help protect them from disaster and corruption.
All right. So that go into my next question. When did you realize that the cycle of improvement was at work in your life?
When people started asking my advice, when I started getting offered to take on different assignments
Mm,
inside the institution, uh, I became a certified HIV and hepatitis C counselor, and I was recommended to do that through one of the doctors that was over the disease infectious control, a doctor by the name of Denise Taylor. She recommended I do it. She said, you have a lot of potential, and you got a lot of inmates to look up to you, and you can influence them to make healthy choices, healthy decisions to avoid spreading these germs and these diseases that's escalating in the system. uh, I started being relied on. I didn't know how to read or write at one time, so I had people asking me to help them write letters, to help them get establish visiting rights, visitation from their family, get their family to come visit them, get their children back a part of their life and stuff. And I would share in different groups I was in the struggle that I was having with my son growing up, and it seemed like as he was getting older, we were growing further apart rather than closer together. And so I would share this in different groups I was going to, and then when I would get back to the yard, people would, pull me to the side, let me know, man, I'm going through a similar problem, man. I don't even know how to talk about it. What? So when that would begin to happen, I would see how I was being influential in to a large extent, and as a result, it motivated me to take on more responsible roles. And so I think that's when
That's process. Great, and that's a great segue, because Paul Jr., I want you to tell me, what positive change did you recognize in your father, and when that became realistic to you? Because I need to hear a little bit more from you.
The first time I seen him preach.
Talk about that.
First time I seen him preach, and it was just a feeling that came over me that I never felt before.
Okay.
Like just something good, like something that it kind of gave me hope. Just hearing them preach. You hear all the bad things a person has done. They don't tell you all the good stuff that they do. It was just like, man, like dang, people been lying to me my whole life, like, cause this ain't the person that they telling me that this was. But then it was a flip side to that too, though. I can't lie. It was like, man, like, where is this dude? Like, it's two different people, man. Like, on the part of me, because I was a knucklehead, I wanted him to be that bad guy. I wanted him to be blue. You know what I'm saying? I wanted him to be that because I worked hard at my reputation. I worked hard in the street. So it was like, man, now I gotta try to do good. Like, I gotta try to be like him, like, because of that feeling that I had. I wanted that good feeling, and I never really had that, and I tried to grasp hold. I think that's the first time, the first thing that I tried to grab hold of from him being in prison.
Oh, now that's why I wanted to go.
Is
that's
God.
why I wanted to go. So you telling me, Paul Scott Jr., you witnessed your father preaching in prison? So that means you and him was in prison together. Yeah. All right, talk about that.
Yes.
That's a perfect segue. Tell me a little bit about that.
We were sent. When I got there, I remember the night I got there, that you got to go through like medical, and well, I remember when I was on the bus, with this dude. I went all the way from the county jail with all the way to reception, all the way to there. And I said, when we was on the bus, I said, man, I think this the pen my dad is at, man. And he was like, your dad? He was like, yeah. I said, yeah. I said, but he might be on the other side though, because there's two sides. They said it was two sides. So anyway, long story short, I get to the line. We were going through the medical process. So I see this big old dude. He might have been the biggest dude on the yard. And I said, hey, man. I said, hey, homie. And he looked at me and he was like, yeah, what's up? And I was like, hey, you know Paul Scott? He like, yeah, yeah, I know Paul Scott. Why? What's up? I said, I'm the son. So he said, oh, man. And he knew. He was like, oh, man, hold on, man. So he went over there and he got it. He went over there and yelled to his cell or whatever. And my dad came right on over there.
Man.
Yep.
Man.
And that's the first time I seen him.
Man,
yep.
So Paul, now I got to shift back to you, because here it is. Paul Scott Jr. walking into the same prison, coming through medical. Tell me what was going on in your heart, man, when you saw your son, man.
I just broke. I
Mm,
broke, man. Uh, the guy was there getting his diabetic
mm,
treatment, and little Paul, like he said, he saw him. He asked him, dude said, "Yeah, I know him. What's up?" He said, "I'm his son." He said, "What?" He said, "Hold up, man." And the guy was getting his diabetic lunch
mm.
because they give him a little lunch along with it, and
Right.
he gave his lunch to my son. He said, "Man, don't worry about him. I go get him." So he shot word to me, and I thought the dude that told me was jiving.
Mm,
But I knew I had a certain amount of time to get there. But it was after regular activity movement.
mm,
And so I had to go. It was a disturbance taking place, so I couldn't really get a clearance through the lieutenant or sergeant to go. But what I did, I used the legal mail route to get out of the section that I was in. So I told him I was going to the legal mailbox. And I had to pass the hospital quarter when I did. So when I looked down, I seen that it was some new arrivals by the way they were dressed.
right.
So I went to the legal mailbox, made a U-turn, came back, went down there. And when I walked up on him, I just went through through the turnstile, and I'm walking. He see me, he step away from the crowd, and he coming towards me, I'm coming towards him. We embrace. The officer who was patrolling that area, back was turned. And so we embraced for a few minutes, and when he turned around and looked to try to investigate, the guys that came with him, with little Paul, said, "Hey, that's a father and son situation." So he went further to investigate. When he looked and saw with me, he said, "Hey, Scott, is that you? That your son?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, you cool? Go ahead," because he knew I wasn't no disturbance. I wasn't no problem.
Mm,
So we stood there and talked for a few minutes. I let him know, "Man, what section you going to?" He said, "They tell me I'm going to B." I said, "Well, I'm in D. I'll see you tomorrow."
mm.
So first thing that morning, I took him a care package,
Yeah.
Zops and Wops,
Right.
candy,
Right.
some sweets, some cosmetics, gave him, some funny money,
Mm,
inmate canteen
yeah.
scripts, and let him know, "Man, I'll see you later on this evening." We met at church that evening.
Mm,
Uh, but I broke because I'm seeing me all over again.
mm,
And then I'm realizing now, like he said a few minutes ago, he had to live for me and him on the street because of the reputation I left. Now he in prison. He's a gang member. I'm a born again Christian and a model prisoner. I'm working at the capacity of a staff member. At that time in the third position, but I worked in a total of 4 different positions at the capacity of a staff member. So I'm realizing now I got to live for him and for me and keep him straight, keep him safe.
mm,
And so the first thing I let him know that night that we met at the chapel, that, "Hey, man, we got to make a pact agreement, man, that
mm,
nothing separates us. That the only thing separate us is
mm,
whoever go home first, man. But ain't no transfer, ain't no nothing. We got to ride this out."
mm,
And that was an agreement that we made. And we
mm.
were cellies for 4 years until I eventually got found suitable for parole and release.
So you telling me, Paul, a California state prison institution. Now, you got to tell me a little bit about that because automatically I know in most systems, if they're father and son or kin, somebody have to ship. So you telling me that system went along with you and Paul Jr. becoming cellmates?
Yes. It was we was monitored for the first 4 months. They didn't let us become celly right away because we never lived together in society. He was conceived 2 days before I was arrested on the case. 8 months, 26 days later, he was born. I was tried, convicted, and sentenced. Like I said, I turned 20 years old on June the 21st, 1981. He was born on June the 25th,
Mm,
4 days later. So we never lived together in society. So we really didn't know one another. And
mm,
like I said, I'm a model prisoner. I'm saving the state money. He's a gang member. This is documented. So
mm,
it's like, hey, we can't take a chance that his son coming here disrupted his program. But overall, bottom line, although because I worked for the head psychiatrist, I was a dual diagnosis drug and alcohol counselor, he pulled some strings to get my son there for me.
mm,
I didn't ask him directly. I just made mention that he might be losing me, man. You might be losing me.
mm,
He said, "What you mean?" I said, "Man, my son just took a deal for 7 years. Wherever he go in this system, I'm going to be with my son. I ain't never lived with him one day in society. But wherever he go in this system, I'm going to be there with my son, man. Because he's a nice looking, handsome young man." I said, "I ain't going to let him come in this system. Nobody take advantage of it. So wherever my son go, I'm going to be with my son, man."
mm,
So next week, my son was getting off receiving a release where I was at.
mm.
Now, the man obviously didn't want to lose me or what, I don't know.
And he pulled some
But
strings.
I'm gonna say overall,
Mm-hmm.
God made it happen. I'm gonna
Okay.
give the glory to God.
Okay.
The
That's great.
Lord knew, as I was sharing earlier, I'd been teaching and helping out along the way, doing things. I didn't get bitter and angry. They wouldn't let me go home. Bottom line is, I was only supposed to do 12 years and 8 months. I did 25 years.
Mm.
After they finally found me suitable for parole and calculated my time, I fell into the matrix of 12 years and 8 months. I
Mm.
did 12 years and 4 months, longer than what I actually. But when you got an indeterminate sentence, they can do you that way because you got to be found suitable to be released rather than just having the actual determined release date. It's indeterminate.
Mm. So Paul Jr., I think our audience need to know, how did you feel now you in a cell with a total stranger? This is your father. How did that make you feel?
It was bittersweet, to be honest with you. It was I still wanted to
Mm.
bang. That's all I knew really. Was
Mm.
banging. So and then it was a blessing because I feel good. I mean, because I know I had somebody there that's gonna have my back
Mm.
100. And then the the unspoken love, like, because we wasn't really, oh, I love you, I love you, I love you, but the unspoken love and comfort that I had when I was with him or in the cell, or I knew I was going to go lay back in the cell, I had that comfort of my dad.
Mm. Mm. That's good, man. That's good. So I got a
Yeah.
question for both of you all. I'm gonna hit you with it. How important it is to break the cycles of poverty and incarceration in broken families in the Scott generational legacy. How important is that, Paul
It's
Senior?
unbelievably important.
Okay.
I can't put a amount on it. I just say it's infinite.
Okay.
It's of infinite importance because I'm the elder now.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I'm 60 years old. I got a number of nieces and nephews, great niece and nephew, great niece and nephew, that I'm an example for them. I got to leave them something behind. I got to make sure doors is open for them that have never been opened before. Opportunities are made available.
Okay.
So I have to be an entrepreneur. I have to be creative. I have to continue to grind to make sure opportunities are made available for them, which is what I'm doing now, making the sacrifices and going above and beyond to do the things that I'm doing to make the contacts, to network, to write books, to go on speaking engagements,
Okay.
to be doing institutional correctional ministry, prison ministry, whatever term you want to use. But in the process of doing that, I'm establishing the necessary contact and I'm showing them an example that if I can do it, they can do it. It's a better life for them and for you. And then my family has been blessed tremendously as a result of a lot of the work that I've done. I
Okay.
mean, they go on trips. I got a niece that just went on a trip, and she asked me to pray for her while she was going. When she got where she was going, she let me know I made it safely. When she left, she said, I'm headed back. Keep me in prayer. When she got back, she let me know she made it. So for me to be confided in, to take on those responsibilities, to make sure that the generational curse, the legacy of destruction and having a positive future
Mm.
is placed in front of us.
That's good. That's good, Paul. So tell me a little bit about you. So you just told me you're an author. Tell me a little bit about your book.
Well, Paul Jr. and I, we authored the book Abandoned Before Birth, United in Prison, and it was being sold at Amazon. We didn't really fully agree on the manner in which the publisher went about doing it. So
Mm-hmm.
what we've done is we've done a revision on it,
Okay.
and we've changed the name, which is United We Stand, a father and son, biological son becoming united in a prison cell. And it's going to have photos, which initially we wanted photos in the first one. It's going to have photos in it showing how we first met, the first visit we had, the last visit we had, and then when we became cellmates and visits, we were having on taking photos on visits we had while we were cellmates at the same place we first met at. And then
Mm.
his son coming to visit us while we cellmates.
Mm.
And not me not wanting his son to end up in that type of situation. His son don't even have an arrest record.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So we want to keep it that way.
Okay. Now, Paul Jr., how important it is. You just heard your father say it's important to break this generational cycle of destruction and poverty and incarceration. Tell me how that fit in your wheelhouse. What are you doing now to do that, Paul Scott Jr.?
Uh, well, I never missed a game since I've been out. Uh, I've never missed a game. I've always been there for my son. Um, and I just lived a different way. You know, I had a few slip ups still here and there, but I've built a good relationship with him based on the relationship that I have with my father now. The things that he instilled in me, the things that he's instilled in me has gave me tools to be there and to break the cycle. Because I believe that the buck stopped with me, with my son. I'm a speaker.
Okay.
You know, he's a good kid. But it just doesn't stop with the Scots. It's other people out there that needs that. You
Okay.
know, and that's why I be involved in different outreach programs as much as I
Mm-hmm.
can. I do work a lot, but it's important to give back to the young people that's going through the same thing that I've been through. You know, and because I didn't have outlets. You know, like I had um, a stepdad or in my life, but I still want to live up to my dad's name,
Okay.
and uh he was how can I say that giving back to when I look at other young men from my community and I see what they're going through, I know they don't have an outlet. Like the thing I asked about, like nobody asked me, like nobody gave me an outlet. Nobody asked me how I
Mm-hmm.
feel. Nobody asked me how am I doing. It was just they thought I was okay because I'm just smiling, I'm just playful, and I'm just doing my thing. So it's important to for young men to have different outlets. To know that people can change. Fathers, uncles, whatever the men that was in their life can change. So that's important for me. Um, to breaking the cycle is just not with the Scots. It's with a young man that or a young lady that's going through similar things. That you could you could get through things when you let stuff out. Like because when you feel like you have an outlet, when you have an outlet to let certain things out, or somebody that's to even just ask how you doing or how you feel about that, so somebody can release some of the anger or the frustration or the confusion. We don't have that. So it just be bottled up, and then the only way that you know how to get it out is in the
Mm-hmm.
streets or what you see. So it's gonna come out one way
That's
or another.
good. That's good. That's good,
Yeah.
Paul Scott Jr., man. I appreciate your heart. We're going to get ready to close down with this podcast, but what are you working on? You got any projects you working on right now that maybe you want to let our listeners know so they can hear more about your story? Because I like the way we're able to get through this podcast. We're getting a father and son telling the story because, like you say, a lot of times people don't ask. They just expect for you to be in the story and you be the character in the story, but you never get to have a voice. So I'm excited about the voice that you have, that your father have given you. So anything you want to just tell our listeners as we get ready to close?
I'm gonna give back. I'm in the process of putting something together myself. It'll be
Oh,
at you shortly.
okay.
I just work. I just if I don't work, I don't eat. I got my daughter 12, man. She like Jordans and stuff, so I gotta go to work, man, to keep
Oh.
her to keep her happy. But yeah, but I gotta give it back to the community, man. I gotta if my story don't reach nothing but one person, man, I know that I did some good.
All
Uh,
right. That's great, man. So I appreciate y'all, man. Paul Scott Sr., Paul Scott Jr., for being on the show. This is from the Inside Out podcast, and we're so grateful to have such a dynamic father and son breaking that cycle of self-destruction
and
and impoverity.
we not like Paul Jr. said. It's not just breaking the Scott cycle. We want to help break the complete cycle. So we
I
want
like
to be
that.
able to use our story to reach as many families and help as many families as we possibly can. First of all, not make the same mistake that we made. Not that it was a mistake, because at first I thought it was a curse for my son to come to prison to be with me, but it was really a blessing in disguise, because he helped teach me some things that I didn't know about myself. And he helped me get in touch with some things that I had sugarcoated with spirituality and becoming intellectual or academically, renowned. Which really, uh, he exposed me to myself. Let me know, hey man, you still a kid inside. I still was a kid. I was still 19 years old to a large extent. And he helped point that out to me. And I had to surrender and realize, hey man, tighten up your bootstrap and grow in them areas that you haven't grown in. So to help family members, because some fathers might still have some of those issues that I had. They still might be 19, 17, 18, and their children might see it but not know how to point it out to them, and the fathers might not want to admit it. But ain't nothing wrong with admitting it and growing in it, because the relationship gets richer, and that's what we want, is rich relationships, not poor.
That's good. That's good. From the Inside Out podcast, we teach through real life stories. This is our first episode with Scott Sr. and Jr., and I'm excited to see where this go from. We're signing off now. Thank you so much for being on From the Inside Out podcast. Thank you.